Well, I think we can begin. Yes, so hello and welcome to the Comforte webinar. I'm Rohit Chavda, an account manager from Scanty PR, the PR agency for Comforte. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Trevor Morgan, Senior Product Manager at Comforte, and Bob Diachenko, Cyber Threat Intelligence Director at securitydiscovery.com. Today's discussion, which will be light-hearted but informative, as we look to uncover the anatomy of data exposures in the cloud and explore what we can learn from past mistakes. Both Trevor and Bob are two security professionals who live and breathe this topic on a day-to-day basis. I want to share their experiences and observations with you. Of course, we're seeing many cloud and data exposures in the daily news cycle, which is certainly concerning. Thankfully, in this chat, both Trevor and Bob will advise on how to better understand the many risks posed to data in the cloud and how to effectively protect it to meet the modern demands of regulatory compliance. Let's have each one of you say a few words about your role, organization, and background. Bob, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and what got you interested in identifying data leaks?
Right. So, first of all, welcome everyone to this short but insightful session, I hope. I really hope that you will learn at least something from our experience, from my experience, because I got into the cybersecurity area by a chance. So it was really a coincidence. I worked in a big company that had a data breach, and I was not into cybersecurity area at all. So for me, it was a big surprise that our company might have had a data breach like that. So I became really curious about how it happened, why it happened, started to ask many questions to people who knew more than me. And yeah, it took me a couple of more years in order to learn something basic, something not basic, but here I am exploring the world's biggest data breaches, showcasing the most terrifying scenarios of what happens when someone left their assets online in public internet. And the most interesting thing here is that I don't use any sophisticated techniques or penetration techniques or something like that. So basically, I use my own skills to search for data that's publicly exposed. I use what I called Google-like search engines, which uncovers pretty much everything that is there, and everyone in the world can use it. So with my discoveries and my experience, I really want to show the world and highlight that this is technically available for everyone with the internet. So that's how simple it is.
Wow, it's really interesting going full circle from being a company that suffered to then helping others. And Trevor, how did your background prepare you for working in cyber?
Yeah, thanks Rohit, and thanks Bob as well. I'm going to be learning along with everybody else because Bob's got a lot of really fascinating anecdotes that we're going to dive into. I'm going to add sort of the color commentary from the discovery and protection perspective, meaning that obviously some of the ways that an enterprise or an organization can mitigate the detrimental effects of an incident would be through proper data discovery, proper data protection. What does that all mean? I won't be diving too deeply into the technical aspects of that. I'll keep it high level so we can talk about business value and just really some common sense approaches. Now, Rohit, to your question, my background, I've spent many years in software development, performing a variety of roles from sales engineering to product management and software design, and even product marketing. And my background has really focused quite a few of those years in text analytics. So, In text analytics, that's the art of sifting through massive quantities of textual data to find things. I've worked in the governmental space. I've worked in, applying that to military problems. I've worked to apply that to compliance problems. Obviously, if you're looking for information, obviously finding it in the most sophisticated way possible is key. And obviously that's upstream of protection. So there was just a natural gravitation from that arena of finding information to then what do you do with it if you're an enterprise, if you then want to protect it so that other people can't access that for either regulatory or mandate reasons. And so that's how I got into the space, Rohit. And so I will be happy to provide that color commentary to Bob's analysis to give the common sense perspective of how do you protect this type of data, how do you find it, and really what are some common sense ways to approach it. So thanks for having me here.
Perfect. Thank you both. Before we get started, I'd like to encourage all the members of the audience to input questions into the chat throughout the discussion, and we will be sure to kind of have them answered by our panelists. Right, next slide, if possible. To begin, cybersecurity is serious, but it's good to poke fun when we can. And this cartoon showcasing the power of human error against security technology is a good example of why it should not be overlooked. Furthermore, looking at this image, we can draw an important question, which is, are breaches always the result of complicated and sophisticated attacks? So Bob, from your experience, can you explain why they're not?
Well, again, my experience is perhaps not that technically backgrounded, but from what I saw, from what I learned throughout these years that I've been searching for the data, my key learning, my key understanding is that technically everything can be found in public. Any sorts of plain text passwords, admin credentials, secret keys, tokens, everything that you would like to keep hidden might be inadvertently exposed. In some cases, this is just a GitHub repository set in public and with all this information just indexed even by Google. I'm not talking about GitHub itself. In other cases, this is an exposed database port which enables access to this information through your browser. But I have this opinion that yeah, everything can be found online, and behind every or almost every sophisticated or ransomware attack that we learn from the headlines actually comes from something that was exposed in public, plain text password or secret key on GitHub. It's all starts from this inadvertent exposure, in most cases as a result of a human error, as we see here. So no matter how many security installments or software or teams of engineers looking after the data you have, there's always a chance for a tiny human mistake that would spoil it all, and yeah, brings this Trojan horse onto your premises. You would never know when it happens, how it happens, but in a good case scenario, you would hear from somebody like myself, white hat security researcher, responsibly disclosing you this mistake through email or phone. As a worst case scenario, you would find all your network computers locked because of a ransomware attack, which was made available because you left your network RDP passwords exposed, and malicious actor would not need nothing else but just this password to enter your corporate network from the outside. So that's simply as it is, and this cartoon basically highlights years of my work and my research, and it can be a good takeaway from the whole presentation and a good humorous point. But at the end of the day, it should give us all additional thinking about what can we do in order to protect our data, our corporate data, or personal data.
Interesting. So then, Trevor, looking at this cartoon, what recent breach example best displays the principle that the comic conveys?
That's a really good question, and narrowing that down is going to be interesting. So let me think on that for a moment. But a thought came to me as Bob was talking, and it takes me back, and I don't want to date myself, but many, many years. I was working at Cisco Systems, and we were creating virtual software-based switches that were SS7 based. I don't know if anybody on this call remembers SS7. It drove the phone systems. And in essence, we were replacing in telcos around the world these big, massive, expensive mechanical switches, mechanical, electrical, with software. And one of the key things that I learned early on was that when you're dealing with all of these different disparate elements of the software that are doing all these intricate things, that the first thing you tend to jump to when you're seeing strange behavior is the software. Something's wrong with the software. But really, that's the most complex part of it. And I learned by having people yell at me, did you check all of the cables? Did you, by the way, you've been on a support call, no doubt, for your home router or something where they said, did you reboot it? And I've been there with you, if you've ever been there, where I think, I'm not stupid, I have rebooted. But there have been times where I thought, oh, actually, no, I was so busy, I didn't go to that very simple explanation first to check that. And again, that's why I give you that SS7 example. So that brings it to the level of this comic, that very often it's not the sophisticated attack vectors. Now those are out there and there are hacker groups that are using those, but very often if you look at these incidents, it's a very simple entryway in. So that's all background for my now that I've got in mind what I want to talk about. So not too long ago, there was a phishing campaign that was trying to trick people into thinking that they had signed up for a movie streaming service. And obviously, what do you think of when you get that email? I didn't sign up for a movie streaming service. I'm not going to pay that. And obviously, we're talking here about very simple social engineering. If anybody can unnerve you and get you into that moment of fear or panic, what is this? Somebody's signing me up for something I didn't want. They now have you. And that's not a very complex thing to think about. Now, this example goes on that not only did this play upon people's fears and, you know, really the desire to guard their finances. Hey, I don't want to pay for that. But when they called the tech center, they're actually not talking to a tech center, although I'm sure it sounded just like one. These people were trying to manipulate them into doing a very basic installation of malware. And again, when you step back, I mean, when you think of the hacker sitting there in a dark room, hacking it, doing all of these techniques, yeah, that sounds sophisticated. This was pretty easy. It was an email that fished people into making contact with somebody who said, hey, we can fix this. Let's just do this first. We're all used to doing that. Boom. Now the malware's there. So that's what I think of. It's a very easy entry point in. And how do you prevent that? It comes down to having a culture, whether it's within your house or within your enterprise, having a culture of security. And we're going to talk about that a little later. But it starts with a very simple response to these very simple entryways that a lot of bad actors will take to get to information.
And just to add to this story of Trevor's, it got me into thinking of one really interesting and important point, that what do we what do we think sensitive data is? Password, social security number, or your secret token from your USB drive. And I think in nowadays scenarios, even email can be considered as a sensitive information. Given the fact that in most cases, and in Trevor's example, an email was that entry point when a malicious actor would trick you into clicking on some link or installing someone or forcing you to call someone. Is a perfect example of how easy it is to get into someone's trust and make them make the first move and share more than you would expect. And if you have scale it up on the level when you have millions of emails with the same message asking for something, then the chances are increasingly high that you will hear from someone sharing even more sensitive information. And I uncovered several cases with spammers exposing their entire infrastructure with this exact structure of emails and a chain of redirects and proxies that they were using in order to get into people's inbox and got them thinking that they were receiving email from someone they trust. But email was the entry point and nothing else, no passwords, nothing. So is email a sensitive piece of information? Yeah, I would say yes.
Interesting.
Some really great observations there. And I think this kind of nicely segues us into the next area of focus, which is how does one go about discovering such leaks and vulnerabilities? I mean, uncovering leaks, breaches can be viewed as an entire methodology, complete with its own tools and processes. So Bob, can you talk us through the tools and methodology you implement to get the discoveries and results you come across?
I already mentioned in my introduction that I don't use any sophisticated tools or techniques or even scripts to search for this. In most cases, I would say 99% of cases, when I find something sensitive, I use what I call Internet of Things search engines, and there are 5 or 6 pretty big of them which I use, and I would really encourage anyone to try and use them from time to time, because they work pretty much like Google, but for the Internet of Things stuff. So everything that you connect to internet would be considered as Internet of Things. Your Wi-Fi router, your USB drive, or camera, anything that you connect to plug in, it's part of the Internet of Things, and it can be and will be indexed and crawled by those engines. So and to find things over there, you really have to just do a couple of really simple queries, searching for this or that particular data set. But don't underestimate Google as well as a search engine that would help you to identify data leaks. In our today's work, we use pretty much 20 or 30% of our cases come from Google search. We use what we call Google Docs in order to identify sensitive documents and sensitive things indexed by Google. So it's just tells you how accessible and how close to you those things are. And the way those search engines interpret the information, they present it in a really user-friendly way nowadays. So you don't have to learn some language or code to understand what you are looking at. For example, if you search for a database which is called Elasticsearch, It's pretty much like a collection of data structured on your computer. Think of it as a really a hard drive with all those folders structured, and you just run a search to find anything you would like to find. So when you search for open and exposed publicly available Elasticsearch instances, for example, on Shodan, it would present you a list of collections and the size of database, total number of documents, which is part of this data set. Moreover, it will tell you the metadata, count of elements, IP address, ports, host name, so you would understand whose the data is. So a lot of those data which would almost immediately tell you, is that sensitive or not? Is it exposed or just left online without any purpose? So in some cases, you would even need to go these next steps and can actually check what type of data it is by connecting to this data set. So it's all there, it's all indexed, sorted, and presented in a user-friendly way. And it's on not only Shodan, there are other search engines that present the way the data in a really user-friendly way. And yeah, in most cases, you don't have to connect to the host to understand and to see what type of data is there. It's all there collected out. So it's very simple. It's really useful for everyone, not only for system administrators who are might be checking for their environment, but for regular internet users, it also might be really helpful to check for their IP addresses, whether they are exposed or indexed by search engines or not.
Okay. And then, so Trevor, from an enterprise perspective, how can enterprises use discovery tools within their own data environments to uncover risks?
I'm going to start with the premise that every enterprise, small, medium, or large, is going to lose track not only of data, but of sensitive or even highly sensitive data. Now, I know that any one of us, and a lot of us have been involved in IT, would go, no, we've got processes, procedures, and no, we're not going to do that. So we don't have to explore that, or if we do, we'll just have some interns poking around. No, we're all good. Every enterprise is going to do this. I'm going to give you an example. For the past nearly 20 years, I take lots of pictures, and now with phones and 35 millimeters, I have, I think by last count, over 10 that I've found, over 10,000 pictures. And I have had many laptops and tablets and hard drives, and I've never really organized those. And so for the past and this is me alone, for the last 2 years, I've been in the process of trying to find, deduplicate, and organize those pictures. And the number of duplicates of pictures I have found, again, I'll move from one hard drive to another. Hard drive's failing, I take the whole thing and I move it to another. Now you have two, I move to another laptop, then I've got a backup drive. This has been an enormous process of trying to find what I have, trying to find what is important. And again, I have a lot of pictures I don't care to save. And of the important ones, do I need one or do I need many copies? I'm giving you this explanation to say that if I alone as a person can lose track so horribly of something like that, what is an enterprise doing? Well, with all of the different workflows going on in let's say a medium-sized, large-size enterprise, lots and lots and lots of sensitive data is either being used for transactional processing or contracts or DevOps testing, or I can keep data analytics, on and on and on. And a lot of that is going to be sensitive. And I'm very mindful too of what Bob said. what is sensitive data? If they haven't even thought about that, that may be a good place to start. But lots of information, and now they've got cloud mandates, and we're going to go cloud first, cloud native. An enterprise needs to stop, and they need to think through all of these things in terms of what do we have, how do we find it, and to find that is going to take a pretty, and again, I'm thinking of a medium to large enterprise. You're going to need a platform or a piece of software that is geared toward being able to learn what is sensitive data, find that, analyze it, understand where it's fitting into workflows and who is accessing it and who is touching it. We call that data lineage. So that then the organization can make a very smart decision on one thing. How do we protect it? And again, it comes down to that. But you can't protect it. In my example, I can't store away and archive my pictures unless I go through that entire process and then figure out how am I going to control this. The same with an enterprise. So the best advice is for any enterprise, small, medium, large, start off with a tool or platform. You're going to need automation because this is not something for a group of interns who are working with you for the summer to do manual plunking around. You're just not going to be able to close every attack vector, so to speak. Do that advanced discovery, data lineage tracing, and doing this iteratively, I think is really, really key. This is not something that you kick off once and go, we've discovered everything, because in a typical enterprise, that data ecosystem is changing so rapidly that the next week, the next month, it's going to be out of date. And again, it doesn't take but one critical piece of information that can open up that opening for somebody, some organization, some bad actor to get in. So to answer the question succinctly, think through all of this, preferably with a group that does this on a day-to-day basis, and use the proper tools that leverage automation and intelligence to find and understand the data, and then let that guide your protection controls downstream.
Perfect. Right, let's flow into the real nitty-gritty and evaluate some real-world incidences that, Bob, you have uncovered. So let's start with a breach that took place at Microsoft with a customer database exposure of nearly 250 million records. Just goes to show that even the largest, most tech-savvy companies can experience large-scale incidences. Bob, can you give us the high-level overview of the Microsoft database exposure and what you uncovered?
Yeah, that was one of the most interesting things that I explored or discovered throughout my entire research. First of all, it was a really huge trove of data that was left online. And second, the nature of information that was there was not immediately sensitive in the way that anyone would think is sensitive. But as we already discussed, it's not necessarily a password or secret to be exposed, but all those tiny pieces of information that would end up in getting a complete customer profile or person profile and would make him or her target for a phishing attack. So Microsoft case, it was exposed Elasticsearch cluster with several hundred gigabytes in size, indexed by pretty much all search engines that I use, and so you would imagine that anyone in the world could have seen this. But as soon as I realized that this data is so diverse and so rich in terms of different types of information there, starting from emails, payment information, support agents and customers chat from all over the world. Moreover, it was spanning a 40-year period from 2005 to December 2015. So it was really that type of information that you would not think of sensitive, that is sensitive. Mostly also some of this information was redacted due to Microsoft was using algorithms, artificial intelligence to redact emails and payment information such as credit cards. However, it appears that not everything, not all was redacted. So some links, some pieces of chats still contained plain text emails, plain text claims, or even payment information. So that was also pretty damaging for any company, not only a giant like Microsoft. So I immediately employed a responsible disclosure procedure to get in touch with Microsoft, and I can only applaud to their efforts to rectify this issue as soon as possible. So I would say within an hour after I got in touch with Microsoft Response Center, they have dedicated team to check for any incoming emails from security researchers to their dedicated email address. I was already on a call with a senior representative from Microsoft, who immediately took actions, and those case was closed, and that issue was secured. However, it was still there from some time. If I recall correctly, it was around 24 hours since it was first indexed. So it's been there for a couple of days, so anyone could have seen this information or download it. But that was, yeah, one of those cases when it was not immediately clear whether this information is sensitive. But as I learned, this would be a perfect database for anyone with malicious intent who would target someone from Microsoft support customer base and pretend to be a support agent and just following up some incident case that that person reported, and just imagine to what type of consequences that would lead. So luckily, it was quickly secured and reported. Case closed, but that many I would understand that many follow-ups were made after that, and retrospective sessions inside Microsoft as well to learn from that exposure. So yeah.
Okay, then so from your perspective, then what's a good takeaway from this incident that others should kind of learn from?
Well, the interesting part is that there is no simple takeaway from this or similar incident. As I mentioned, they really try to redact the data by using their algorithms, and if it was successful, then the most of the data would be just simply non-useful because yeah, no one needs a redacted phone number or email. But as we can see, no algorithm is perfect, no support agent is perfect. It still might end up in public domain, and it was really some pretty simple explanation from their side. It was firewall or some reboot taking place at their premises, and this database was exposed. And there is really no simple takeaways or learning from this or similar exposures, rather than educate internally and externally about how this data might be seen or found online using those search engines. I would imagine that if a dedicated person inside Microsoft or outside Microsoft would monitor any Elasticsearch clusters exposed with keywords set up internally, they would find this information maybe even quicker than I did at the time. So my main lesson here is that education is the key to cyber hygiene and to anything that person inside the company or outside the company can do in order to keep an eye on their assets.
Okay, and then kind of Trevor, like if companies like Microsoft are vulnerable, how can smaller organizations even hope to feel secure as they handle sensitive data?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it takes us again back to that point of complexity we sometimes equate with sophistication, and that's not necessarily a good equivalent. And so smaller organizations actually may be in a really good position because meaning their operations are probably not as complex as a very large enterprise, a multinational enterprise. The workflows that are being carried out within the organization, I understand even a small organization has lots of different workflows, but much more streamlined and much more containable than a larger organization. And even the IT environment is much more manageable. And so for a smaller organization, and again, this goes to the comic and to a lot of Bob's comments about start off with the simple explanation, the simple attack vector. Why not put the focus? I mean, you could start looking at really complex, platforms and intrusion detection and access controls. Yes, that's all very good, but start simple. Look at your organization and what is the culture around data that you have in your, and again, the question's about smaller organizations, in your small organization, and start from there. How do your workers, your professionals view data? How do they handle data? How do they perceive data requests? And work on the culture of the organization first. I received an email in my organization yesterday, and it was an obvious phishing attempt. But I spent about 10 minutes and it got through our sophisticated filters. And yes, we're a cybersecurity organization, still got through. And I examined it for about 10 minutes. I could have just said it is or it isn't, or I could have responded, which would have been catastrophic. But at the end of the day, because we have a very tight culture of data security and data privacy, I paused and I took the time really to understand what was going on. Then I made the simple decision and moved on. And I think that a smaller organization can feel very confident that they can manage all of this, but start with the people who are interacting with data first and tighten that up, and then move on to more sophisticated topics such as how do we find the data, how do we explore its lineage, who's handling it, and how do we protect it, and even more than that, what sort of regulatory controls do we have on top of us? Those are all important, but start with the culture of data security and data privacy.
Great. If we advance to the next breach, we're looking at the second breach that took place at communication provider Centurylink, which involved 2.8 million records. Often enterprises need to be aware of not only their own environment, but their third-party partners' environments too. Bob, can you tell us how Centurylink encountered an issue stemming from their third-party platform?
Right, and I understand that we are running out of time, so we won't have time to cover all those cases. So I would combine Centurylink case and the Choice Hotels case into one quick example of how the data can end up being ransomed or stolen or simply wiping off. So in Centurylink case, it was a MongoDB installment which was misconfigured and hence indexed by search engines and seen by me. However, it was not only me that discovered it and took actions. It was also a malicious actor who took advantage of the exposed information and destroyed it. We don't know whether they copied it and then destroyed or destroyed it first, but as a result, the information, the production database that belonged to Centurylink and Choice Hotel in the next slide, in the next case, all this data was destroyed. And when I reported this to Centurylink, their explanation was that it was not an environment that was managed by them directly. Rather, it was a third-party notification platform that used their database. And that, again, created a really interesting question, not only for me, but for the industry. Is your organization responsible for your customers' information, or you are transferring this responsibility to a third party or anyone who is dealing with your data? So in case of Centurylink, they were simply trying to make themselves an innocent party here. So they were, it was not theirs, it was third party. But at the end of the day, this information was destroyed by a malicious bot attack who targeted this open database and destroyed it. And the whole situation got me into thinking about what can we do, what an organization or a security community can do in order to prevent such things from happening. And Trevor mentioned really good point in his previous note about the culture. And I think that's a really crucial point, culture and education about what steps are taken inside your organization, not only as like one company, but a chain of many contractors, subcontractors who are dealing with data, with data of your customers. Do they have a plan of actions or understanding how sensitive this information is in order to monitor it more closely or pay more attention about the tools and techniques that employees use in order to prevent this data or monitor their exposures online? That's really long shot question for any company that's would care about this information. So over to you, Trevor.
Rohit, did?
Hello?
Yep. Is there a question toward me?
Yes, do you have any final thoughts to what Bob had just mentioned?
Apologies. Yeah, I think some final thoughts would be, moving beyond that culture of security and that culture of privacy. I would say we can establish. Well, I'm going to give you two quick lists, and if you remember them, the first would be people, process, and tools. Okay, it doesn't have to be any more complicated than looking at your organization, understanding the people, as well as the data subjects, the people about whom you're collecting information, looking at the processes that you're carrying out. What are all of the people doing with this data, and what are the tools that the data is getting fed in? So I always keep that in mind as I'm looking at a scenario. Is who's touching the data, what are you doing with the data, and then you can, where is that data flowing through an application, a platform, something like that, and then you can make the right decision on protecting it. But there's another little list of 2 points I want to make sure that everybody understands, which is, as soon as data enters into that work stream, the people, process, tools, data comes in, protect it. Don't wait. Protect it at that moment. And obviously we can point to protection methods that will work more effectively within certain workflows than others. For example, you can encrypt it, but what's going to happen when you throw classic encrypted data into a platform that isn't expecting a format that has changed? Well, it may hiccup. So you have other, what we call data-centric protection methods that you can use, and we're happy to discuss that. But at the end of the day, protect it when it's in that environment, as soon as you touch it. And then number 2 on this little list of 2 points, don't deprotect it. Don't deprotect it. There are many times, especially if you don't have the right protection tools, where you'll protect it, then you'll deprotect it because somebody needs to see something, then you'll protect it again, then you'll deprotect it. And that's just opening up time and again a vulnerability. So remember that. Look at the people, process, and tools, and then as data comes into that interchange between the people and process tools, protect the data immediately and strive not to deprotect it. Those are my final thoughts along those lines.
Perfect. Thank you both. Sadly, we are nearing our time allotment. So would you both like to take a question from the audience?
Sure. Toss it at us. Maybe we can take questions and both give a vantage point on it.
Yeah. So first one is, what avenues are there to get everyone on board within an organization take data security seriously?
Bob, would you like to go first?
Can you please repeat the first part of the question? I just didn't hear it.
What avenues are there to get everyone on board within an organization to take data security seriously?
Well, I would say from my experience, the data breach that I had experienced personally when I worked in a company that had a data breach, so I felt partially responsible for that, because I felt ashamed about working in the organization that had a data breach. So we only took it serious after the incident, after it happened. So it really it's not something that you would think of when you're in safe harbor or doing your business as usual. Until this thing happens to you, you wouldn't realize that it's real. At least it was the mindset back in 3 years time ago, 4 times here. Now of course, with all those ransomware attacks waves and data breach headlines hitting up on everyday basis, most people are really consider this as a serious threat. But again, until it don't hit you on a corporate level, you don't think about it seriously. So it's like fire set in your corridor, just waiting for its time to be engaged, but you don't think about it seriously until it happens. That doesn't mean that you don't have to learn about possible consequences and aftermath about on those cases, but it really needs to happen at some point to any organization in order to start them think more seriously about consequences. So I wish every organization to suffer from a really minor data exposure to be reported by a security researcher, a white hat security researcher, and close down before it got any serious consequences. Something really light or not really damaging, but that's the only case when a company will be prepared for any bigger cases.
I'm going to take an approach on, and by the way, it's a fascinating question, whoever came up with that. Thanks for that. But I'm going to take an approach that is going to put the focus on leadership in an organization, small, medium, or large. I've been in everything from a 9-person startup all the way to a 60,000 person company. So I've seen all of the variations, and almost invariably, the responsibility is put on, let me just call them the regular workers, those of us who were not at the executive level, who had to take course after course online every quarter, go through this, that, and the other. And you did it, but that was not instilling a culture of data respect and data privacy and data security. So I'm going to put the focus somewhere else. It's the executive leadership and a board that is responsible for a company's assets. That's what they're there for, to guide the company and guard the assets and grow the assets. And data is their biggest asset. So I would hope that the first place to start, if you're an executive, start here. If you're somewhat below that, push the information back in that we need executive, not just sponsorship, we need executive leadership on this, and we need executive evangelism on this. Executives and leaders all across an organization need to be passionate about this topic. Not just, hey, take that course and you'll meet our compliance goal for the quarter. I've actually had management come to me and ask me to do something where I said, we don't do that. That's breaking a, this or that policy process, right? Just do it. I need this done. What is that doing and saying? So my point, going back to, if you're in leadership, embrace this and embrace it joyously, because data is your most valuable asset, and work with your organization and lead by example to show that most of these data breaches and incidents and loss of data occurs through very simple things. And if you embrace it and you evangelize it and you support the programs to get other people really to adopt that culture of data privacy, data security, your entire organization, all the tools, all of the platforms, everything, great. But if you don't have that and leadership that is actively participating, I would think it's all for naught, and you're going to be involved at some point in a pretty serious incident. So start there, leaders, and really get your employees on board and kind of revel in the fact that, hey, we take this seriously because these are our customers, these are our partners, and we're going to guard our data because it is our gold coin.
Perfect. Well, I think that nicely concludes this discussion. Many thanks to both Trevor and Bob for their time and insights today. And thank you for everyone that attended. Bob, Trevor, what would be the best way for anyone to get in touch with you?
So I'm mostly active at Twitter. So follow me at Mayhem Day One, Elias, or drop me an email at bob@securitydiscovery.com.
And you can always find me at Comforte. It's tmorgan@comforte.com, and be glad to take any questions, queries, or calls for information and work with you on that. So just reach out, and we're happy to help. We also have a great website, comforte.com, and you can also find ways to get a hold of me and my colleagues through that. But we're here to help.
Excellent. Well, thanks again to both of you for taking the time out to have this discussion. And thank you again to everyone that attended today. Hope you all have a great day and take care.